have turned my mourning into dancing. You have removed my sackcloth again.
Archbishop Dominica Bierman has traveled the world for over 3 decades proclaiming the gospel from Zion to the nations with miracles following. She exposes the false doctrines of replacement theology and preaches restoration to the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua
I
HaMashiach.
will proclaim to the nations your salvation, your soon return to Jerusalem. I will declare your holy name, Yeshua, and your love for your people.
By myself, when Abraham, was ready to butcher his son, sacrifice him, said, by myself I swear it. It is a declaration of Yahweh, because you have done this thing, and you did not withhold your son, your only son, I will richly bless you and bountifully multiply your seed like the stars of heaven and like the sun that is on the seashore, and your seed will possess the gate of his enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed because you obeyed my voice. Beloved ones, therefore, the covenant of substitution happens right here on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. This is the place when Yahweh sealed the covenant with Abraham. And where he said that, his seed will possess the gate of their enemies. Also giving us a glimpse that we are going to have a lot of enemies. But the seed of Abraham will possess the gates of the enemies. And he will richly bless and richly multiply. All these promises are done in the heavenly portal of the Temple Mount on the altar that Abraham himself built to put his own son there. Of course, we know that thousands of years later, we have the Son, the only Son of Yahweh, the only Son of the God of Israel, the only begotten Son, the one that is not created but begotten, the only one that actually also gets sacrificed in Jerusalem for the sake of the salvation of Israel and mankind. Why did he do it? And very often we say, well, why would Yeshua do it? Why would the Father send his only begotten Son to die for these human beings that keep on sinning, keep on perverting themselves, and even keep on having interactions with fallen angels? Why would he do it? Would you do it for people so wicked? But he did it because of Abraham. He did it because in this portal on the Temple Mount, there was a covenant made. Abraham gave him his son, and though Yahweh said, stop, enough, you've proven to me that you really love me, and Yahweh said, then in that case, I will come and I will give you my son. And it will be my son that will be for the redemption, the salvation of Israel, for the restoration of Israel, and for all of your seed to possess the gate of their enemies and to possess the land that I've given you. So this is the power. The power is that Yeshua would have never come unless this covenant of exchange would have happened right here on Mount Moriah. Yahweh is a God of covenant. And all of these covenants take place in portals, where there is a heavenly interaction between heaven and earth. In this case, we see an angel that is called the angel of Yahweh. Could it be that is called the angel of Yahweh was Yeshua in his pre-incarnate form? It could have been, because we see again that when the same angel of Yahweh shows up in the book of Joshua, when they're coming through the Jordan River and they're coming into the land for the first time, and then before they conquered Jericho or anything like that, the angel of Yahweh appeared to Joshua there. We're going to be in that area. The angel of Yahweh appeared to Joshua there. And he said, take off your shoes, because the land where you are standing is holy ground. Declaring the land of Israel holy ground from the beginning. But the truth is that we never take our shoes before angels. only before Yahweh. Do you remember Moses? When Moses comes to Mount Horeb, and he comes to the holy mountain and he sees the burning bush, and he has the voice of Yahweh speaking to him through the burning bush, and it says the first thing that he tells him to do is take your shoes from your feet, for you're standing on holy ground. We only remove our shoes before Yahweh himself. In other words, I believe that the angel that appeared or that spoke and that stopped Abraham from sacrificing Isaac was none other than Yeshua, that eventually would become the Word made flesh, would be born of the woman Miriam, hallelujah, in Bethlehem, which is not far from Jerusalem. And he will, by his sacrifice, bring redemption to Israel and to mankind. Now you understand that things don't happen at random. Things are all connected in the kingdom of heaven, and we need to understand how the kingdom of heaven operates. So that's the first happening on this portal. Now let's go, and we're going to see another happening, and we're going to jump all the way to 1000 BC approximately, to the time of King David. Okay, King David already is king over Jerusalem. He's already established Jerusalem as the city of David, except he had a little problem. The Jebusite had the place called the stronghold of Zion. He had a little problem. So this place that is called the Temple Mount today, where the 2 temples were built and the 3rd temple will be rebuilt, and Yeshua will rule and reign the nations for 1,000 years with a rod of iron, this place was in the hands of a Jebusite. His name was Ornan, or Aravna. Ornan the Jebusite was the owner of the place. He had the portal. You understand what I'm saying? He had the portal. In the same way that today many Muslims have the portal in the Mount of Olives. In the same way that many people, even many Muslims, are claiming the portal in Nazareth. Nearly in every place you're going to find many Muslims, unless they are religious Orthodox Zionist Jews that advance and take land and take places and take portals like Bethel and Shiloh and places like that. They all are taken because the enemy always wants to take the portals, because that's a place of power. You understand? That's a place where the heavenly interaction happens. That's the place where if you are worshiping any other god, you get the power from that god. Because that's a place where the fallen angels can come down, because it's like you would call, let's say when you enter Jerusalem and you entered into the city, there is a gate to the city. You enter through the gates. But if you have there some enemies that are holding the gate tight and shut so you cannot get in, but his people can get in, you have a problem. The Temple Mount is in this situation right now. Even though on paper it belongs to Israel, we got it back during the 6-day war, miraculously. And the Israeli flag was flying over the Dome of the Rock. Our then very secular defense minister, Moshe Dayan, very secular, very fearful that there will be a Muslim retaliation, gave it to the Waqf, the Muslim authorities. And since then, the Muslim authorities have been in an autonomy over there, not a sovereignty, but an autonomy. We have the sovereignty. Israel has the sovereignty over the Temple Mount, not the Waqf, not the Muslim authorities, but de facto they do. Because de facto the other ones worshiping there freely, while the Jews are not allowed to go up to worship freely. In fact, if we would try to go up with shofars, we would not be allowed up. If we go up and we begin to pray there out loud, or if they detect that our lips are moving in any kind of prayer, or even if we have Bibles, we would not be permitted out. We would be ousted from the Temple Mount by the Muslim police. So what happens is that the portal of the Temple Mount has been taken. It's just like at the time of the Jebusites that were holding that stronghold, and they did not let David take it. Do you remember that? And so now comes 1 Chronicles 21, and you remember that David decided to do a census. Joab, the army commander, the chief of staff, was against it. He didn't want him to do the census because it wasn't a divinely appointed census. It wasn't that Yahweh said count them. In the book of Numbers, we can see when Yahweh says count the people. But here, David wanted to count them. It was kind of like, let's see how many people I have. You know, it reminds me sometimes when pastors and leaders, they count the people that they have in their churches and keep on counting them, kind of see if my church is a mega church or not. That was pride. And because of that pride, then they were plagued. Let's take a look at it. 1 Chronicles 21. Then Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count Israel. This was a satanic issue. So David told Joab and the leaders of the people, go, count Israel from Beersheba to Dan, then bring me a report so I may know their number. But Joab said, may Yahweh multiply his people 100 times over, but my master the king, are they not all my master's servants? Why does my master require this thing? Why should it be a cause of guilt to Israel? Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. So Joab departed and went throughout all Israel and finally came back to Jerusalem. And Joab gave the number of the census of the people to David. In all Israel there were 1,100,000 sword-wielding men. Judah had 470,000 sword-wielding men, but he did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, for the king's word was detestable to Joab. So on purpose, he diminished the quantity of people that he told David that he had. But God was displeased with this thing, and he struck Israel. Then David said to God, I have sinned greatly by doing this. But now I entreat you, take away the guilt of your servant, for I have behaved very foolishly. I wonder how many are behaving very foolishly today by constantly counting how many people they have. How many people you have or you don't have. If it's not divinely appointed for you to count the people that you have, don't count them. I really do not know how many disciples I have. Don't have a clue. I think I have thousands upon thousands, but I don't know. And I'm not counting all my disciples. They are in many different nations. And they have many people. I know that even in this group, for example, that is a small group compared to all of our other groups. It's a small group. And yet in the small group we have 5 nations. And we have 5 delegates of different nations, national delegates. And they have people under them and people that they're ministering to. They're also disciples, under us. I don't know how many they do. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, does it? What matters is that he said, be fruitful and multiply. Amen. And fill the earth and subdue it. And so then Yahweh spoke to God, David's seer, saying, go and speak to David, saying, thus says Yahweh, I offer you 3 things. Choose one of them, and I will bring it upon you. So God went to David and said to him, thus says Yahweh, select for yourself either 3 years of famine, or 3 months being swept away before your enemies. Wow, what a choice. 3 years being swept away before your enemies, adversaries, and the sword of your enemies overtaking you, or 3 days of the sword of Yahweh, pestilence in the land, or plague in the land, and the angel of Yahweh ravaging throughout all the territories of Israel. Now consider what I should reply to the one who sent me. That's God the prophet telling David. David said to God, I am in great anguish. Let me fall into the hand of Adonai, for his compassion is very great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man. So Yahweh sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel were killed by the plague. 70,000 in 3 days. And God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. And that also will break through all of our theologies. God will never use his angels to destroy. Yes, he will. In fact, he sent angels to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy. So we cannot say that Elohim's angels, I'm talking about not the fallen angels, I'm talking about the obedient heavenly host. The obedient angels of Yahweh, they often are sent on missions of destruction. In other words, when Yahweh pours out his judgment, it is his own angels. When you read my book, Stormy Weather, you're going to see that there are angels in the storms. Now, there are sometimes storms that are provoked by Satan. For example, when Yeshua was crossing the Sea of Galilee on one of the boats, and he was preaching and teaching the disciples, a great wind arose and threatened to sink the boat where he was. Who would want him dead right there before he fulfills his mission? Of course, Satan, right? And so he rebuked the winds. Wind in Hebrew is ruach. Spirit in Hebrew is ruach. So there's a direct connection between winds and spirits. Okay, winds and ruach. That's right. And so there were evil entities on those winds. When he sent the angels to Sodom and Gomorrah, it was his angels that were sent there to destroy. And here in Jerusalem, it was his angels that came to destroy, to kill 70,000 of the Israelites because of the sin of David. That is a lot of guilt for one king. And God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. Now, he was going to destroy the entire city. Not only the people, but now also the city. But while he was doing so, Yahweh saw and was grieved over the calamity. He said to the destroying angel, "Enough! Now withdraw your hand." And the angel of Yahweh was then standing by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of Yahweh standing between the earth and the heaven with a drawn sword, in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem. And then David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell on their faces. What does sackcloth mean? A sign of mourning and repentance. Clothed in sackcloth, they fell on their faces. And what did they do? We're going to see what they did. They repented. They fell on their faces. And we see here that David went up by the word of God. In other words, God the prophet told him what to do, which he spoke in the name of Yahweh, while Ornan was threshing wheat. What was he threshing? What we talk about Shavuot is what? The wheat harvest, the time of giving the first fruits of wheat. Could it be that this happened in Shavuot? Yes, it could be. Because he was threshing wheat. He turned and saw the angel. Ornan, the Jebusite, turns and sees this angel hanging between heaven and earth. Can you imagine the view for a moment? Please use your imagination. Imagine an angel of Yahweh with a drawn sword. And so he saw the angels. Ornan looked up and he turned and saw the angel. His 4 sons who were with him hid themselves. Why do you think they hid themselves? They were scared. They were terrified. I mean, if you would see an angel with a drawn sword standing between heaven and earth, you probably would be hiding yourself too. So they hid themselves. And when David came to Ornan, Ornan looked up and saw David. Now, understand that Ornan was not a friend of David. He was a Jebusite. He didn't want David to take this place. This was a serious stronghold. But he was scared. I mean, that angel was right over his threshing floor. And so he saw David. He went out from the threshing floor and bowed to David with his face to the ground. He would have never done that. But this angelic appearance made him do that. And then David said to Ornan, "Give me the site of this threshing floor." He couldn't obtain it by war or conflict or nothing. But he came and he said, "Give me the site of this threshing floor that I may build an altar to Yahweh." Here comes the second altar. The altar recovered, right? That I may build an altar to Yahweh. Sell it to me for full price. Please listen what I'm saying. Sell it to me for what? He didn't barter over the price. He was willing to pay full price. I want you to remember that very seriously. I will talk about it in a moment. So he said, "Give it to me for full price, so the plague of my people may be stopped." And then Ornan said to David, "Take it." Huh? The one that was opposing David from taking the place tells him to take it, take it. Let my lord the king do whatever seems good in his eyes. Look, not only take it, but I will give you the oxen for the burnt offerings. For the threshing sledges, I will give it to you. For wood and the wheat for the grain offering, I will give all this to you. King David said to Ornan, "Nope. I insist on buying it for the full price. For I will not take for Yahweh what is yours, or sacrifice a burnt offering that cost me nothing." So David gave Ornan 600 shekels of gold. That is a lot of money. 600 shekels of gold by weight for the place. In other words, the Temple Mount is now purchased by King David. 600 shekels of gold is a lot of money. He purchased the place. Abraham built the altar. King David purchased it and built the altar. In other words, this is possession of King David in Israel forever. Because it's purchased. And you will understand in the Bible that every time that you see something that has been purchased with money, it's because that becomes possession. What does that mean? That means that Yah can promise you something, but you will have to pay the price. Yahweh can promise you something, but in order to obtain what was promised, you will have to pay the price. Do you understand what I'm saying? Will have to pay. And I'm going to repeat it again. Yahweh promised the land to Israel. But Israel needed to fight battles to obtain it. Yahweh promised the land to Abram. But Abram had to buy the cave of Machpelah and the city of Hebron, or the area of Hebron, with money. Ephron the Hittite told Abraham, and he said, take it. What is this between you and I? Bury your dead. Here, take the cave of Machpelah. Take Hebron. Abraham said, no. Name your price. Name your price. And he paid him full price for the cave of Machpelah to bury his dead, to bury Sarah, eventually Leah, and Rebecca. Rachel was buried near Bethlehem. And so we have here a situation where Abraham bought the land. The first piece of land is purchased. And now we have the second piece of it. So Hebron is the first piece of land that's purchased, and that's definitely a portal. And the Temple Mount right there, which is the place that David purchased. And so he built the altar, he bought it, and from that moment, this became the seat of David's kingdom. Eventually, that is the seat where Solomon builds the temple, the first temple, and where Ezra, at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, well, Ezra most particularly, the second temple is built. Nehemiah repairs the walls. Ezra is there as a catalyst and a facilitator at the time of the rebuilding of the temple, the second temple. And then when we come to the 7th century, the early Islam, then we have the Muslims ruling here, and they put there the Dome of the Rock. Now take a look at the Dome of the Rock for a moment. The Dome of the Rock is not a mosque. It's a memorial to Muhammad. So here you go, and you can see now replacement theology from the Muslim side. Instead of Isaac, it's Ishmael. And so now when the Muslims take it over, they change the story. And the story is changed that it's Ishmael, the chosen son, not Isaac. That's why I'm telling you this is not a political thing. This is a spiritual battle, and it is a biblical battle. It's the battle for the covenant and for the fulfillment of the covenant and for the cleansing of the portals that bring about the fulfillment of the covenant. Because what happens is that this Temple Mount has been dedicated as an altar to Yahweh, but right now is an altar to Allah, to Baal. And the Jews are not allowed to pray there. And the Christians are not allowed to pray there. Some Jews are allowed to go up there, but they cannot even do their normal prayers. It's very difficult. It causes clashes. It causes violence. Because again, Hajj Amin al-Husseini told them they are coming to destroy Al-Aqsa. They are coming to destroy all this Islamic compound. According to Islam, they say that this is the third most important place on the earth for them, Al-Aqsa. The Temple Mount. After Mecca and Medina. But again, the Quran doesn't mention Jerusalem, not even one time. This is what I call a concocted story by Satan himself. And the purpose is to destroy Isaac, to obliterate Israel, and for the anti-Messiah to take over and sit on the Temple Mount, sit on the Mount of the congregation. So when you go now to Isaiah 14, and you see Lucifer, and you see the cherub and the fallen angel, and it says, I will lift myself up and I will sit on the mount of the congregation. He means I will sit on the Temple Mount as the real Messiah instead of the Messiah. An anti-Messiah is actually a replacement Messiah. Okay, anti-Messiah is not what you hear like antagonism. Well, of course it's antagonism. Satan is the adversary, the antagonist par excellence. But really anti-Messiah, that word from Latin, means a replacement Messiah. One that is like Messiah but is not the Messiah. So you see that this word, replacement theology, keeps on happening again and again and again as a word of obstruction to the covenant. a word of obstruction for the prophetic restoration of Israel, a word of obstruction for Yeshua to rule and reign from here for 1,000 years during his millennial reign, and eventually for the New Jerusalem to come down on the same place where the old Jerusalem is. All of these things are in the mix, but the anti-Messiah has the plan to sit there on the Temple Mount. I'm not going to get to tell you who the anti-Messiah is. In fact, in the book of 1 John, it says that there's been many anti-Messiahs that have been all the way from that time and even all the way to this time. Hitler was a type of anti-Messiah, we know that. And Constantine was a type of anti-Messiah. And there's been many anti-Messiahs. But every time that you see replacement, you find the anti-Messiah. And that's why when we see replacement theology, where, you know, the church replaces Israel and the laws of Rome replace the Torah, the laws of God, and the feast of Rome replace the holy feast, the biblical feast as in the Bible, we are dealing with an anti-Messiah system. So what is Islam then? Islam is an anti-Messiah system, right? That's an anti-Messiah system. And therefore, it worships their God on top of the Temple Mount, declaring that Allah is the one ruling in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem in Arab is not called Jerusalem, it's called Al-Quds, or the Holy. Israel, they don't call it Israel, they call it Palestine, which is in the name of the Philistines and not the name of Israel. Why? Because Israel is a covenant name. In Psalms 83, it says that they are gathering together for one purpose alone. The purpose is that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. Why? Because the name of Israel is the covenant name. Names do matter, by the way. So that's the reason why I say, you know, it's so important you understand the names that Yahweh gives. Yahweh gave the name of his son as Yeshua, which means salvation, healing, and deliverance, and all of the redemption plan that he has, and he did not name him Jesus Christ. That men gave him that name, but God, Elohim, gave him the name of Yeshua. And it's so important to restore the name because Satan always tries to remove the covenant names.
Shalom, I'm blessed to be here. I'm a lot of divine teachings from Archbishop, and I have learned a lot. And my takeaway from this is the end time. This is not a time to sit around. This is not a time to play around. This is time where we stand up together and take our stand in Yahweh to prepare for his second coming. My revelation is to support in terms of prayer.
If you enjoyed today's program, support this broadcast by donating to kad-esh.org. To connect with us, write to info@kad-esh.org. We would love to hear from you.
Spirit like water, Adonai, anoint your bride, anoint your bride.